Hey everyone, this is Thyworm with a new build for Last Epoch, the Quaker. If you're enjoying Last Epoch content, consider subscribing. Let's start with the build philosophy. This character was created specifically to conquer the Monolith, and while a lot of my other builds failed for various reasons, this one has been very successful so far. I've made it into timeline level 100 at the moment, around Echo 13, and there seems to be a bit of a halt for now. That's very acceptable, however, as my character is only level 81, and by leveling up you can definitely get more tanky and dish out a bit more damage, and then I'm sure you're going to be fine. The Quaker uses the revamped Earthquake, which received buffs the last 2 patches, as its main damage source. Other skills are used to augment that damage and provide movement, defenses and buffs. I have face tanked most of the bosses in the Monolith with this, only at timeline 90 with Hearten I needed to move. I'm not suggesting you face tank everything, but you can, and that makes this build ideal to learn the Monolith. A good Monolith build has a few traits I've discovered. It needs to be super tanky, it needs to be mobile, it needs to do damage, it needs various layers of defense, and you need to be able to take and dodge a few hits. In the current version of the Monolith, version 0.7.9e, a very decent build is simply required to properly conquer the Monolith without dying and causing a lot of frustration. Damage output is really secondary. I've tried some more glass cannon kind of builds or dodge based builds, but you simply get one shot every now and then get set back 7 or 8 echoes, and that's not fun. So unless 11th hour games remove this mechanic, I consider those types of builds not viable. On top of all this, you will need a lot of good gear. Beginner-friendly builds for monoliths don't really exist anymore, because good gear is a prerequisite if you are going to be glancing blow capped, crit capped, have high protections and some secondary defensive layers as well. There is, however, simply no way around it. Only with all these requirements in play, you will be able to get very far in a monolith and beat it. The Quaker does offer all of this, however. It is tanky, it does damage, it's fun to play with the skill set, and most importantly, it allows you to take a lot of hits from bosses because of health leech and high protections, so you have a lot of time to learn the boss mechanics for later runs. It offers everything you would want apart from the movement during the monolith maps itself, which makes the build somewhat slow. On the other hand, going slow is safe, and I will give you a few options as well to go a lot faster at the expense of damage output. We've chosen a shaman for the mastery passive. The additional elemental resistance is really great. Our build definitely errs on the safe side though, for all intents and purposes. With over 25k earthquake crits, however, on enemies, it's no slouch. If you have any questions about the build, feel free to join my Discord. We have a nice, active and helpful community over there. Link down below in the description. Let's see what the main stats are that you want. We're looking for simply a lot of defenses and a bit of physical scaling. Glancing blow, crit avoidance, fatality, elemental resistances, and flat and increased percentage physical damage are your most important statistics. Earthquake skills with physical damage, at least in our build, and everything else is pretty straightforward, I would say. Let's look at the skill specialization and the skills we're using. We are using Earthquake as the main skill. The main issue with Earthquake is the mana cost. Last patch, however, the primal list received a way to get mana back quickly using Tempest Strike. We are summoning Thorn totems with Tempest Strike as well, which provides us defenses and chills enemies. We have a frenzy totem for damage, and finally our dodge skill is Leap Slam to get out of sticky situations or to enter the fray in maps. Earthquake, our main damage ability, and that is because of a few nodes in here. The Earthquake tree can be divided into 3 parts for this build. Initial hit damage, getting more initial hits, and making the initial hits undodgeable, which turns out to be really valuable. First, damage. Take 2 out of 4 lethargy, take 3 out of 3 outbreak, because that additional area is mandatory in the monolith with the pack size, and then 5 out of 5 shatter quake. This deals 150% more damage, multiplicative, against chilled enemies. It is not hard to chill enemies, and we're using the totems to do it, but we will get to that. Then, more initial hits. Take 4 out of 5 Rupture for initial hit damage. Take Seismic Smash, removing the aftershocks and adding that damage to the initial hit instead. And finally Seismic Tide, making the initial hit occur 3 times. It is costly and it adds a cooldown, but 2 seconds lines up perfectly with the time we need to get the mana back, so there are no issues here. Finally, we move bottom left, take 1 out of 3 Torpor, 2 out of 3 Buffet, where the mana efficiency is actually quite helpful, and make Earthquake always hit by taking Deep Impact. If you feel your build is too slow, you can remove the to Deep Impact and nodes that lead up to it, and invest in Overwhelm, granting haste and frenzy after using Earthquake. It works really well and it is a personal choice for sure. Earthquake basically gives us two issues to solve: mana and chill. Let's first tackle mana. We are using Tempest Strike to gain mana. It doesn't do a lot of damage for us really, but it does offer a ton of mana. Take 4 out of 4 Reinforced Stone, which is important for the Earth Spike proc, and to get to 5 out of 5 unspent power, giving us 20 mana each Tempest Strike hit that doesn't proc a secondary effect. This doesn't always work, but it is consistent enough together with some passives we get that you get a lot of mana back, enough to sustain Earthquake on a small mana pool. The second thing we're doing is using Tempest Strike to summon Thorn Totems. You have idols for this, but we free up those and just use the skill tree here. Take 1 out of 2 Earthquake and go 4 out of 4 Earth's Aid. Every time you now proc Earth Spikes, you summon Thorn Totems, and those Thorn Totems make use of the Thorn Totem skill tree. Finally, we just take a little bit of damage with 5 out of 5 Elemental Imbuement, and the final point goes into Augury, which increases proc chance every time you miss, ensuring that we aren't too long without totems. All of this was quite a balancing act, because there's this balance between gaining mana or gaining totems. You can't have both in a single strike. After some tweaking, however, this is the sweet spot and it works beautifully. Then summon Thorn Totem. This skill tree consists of two parts. The top part with 3 out of 3 Forested Expanse, 3 out of 4 Eternal Forest and Grove Mind just gives you 5 totems. The right part with 2 out of 5 Memories of Eterra, 5 out of 5 Venom Tipped Thorns and Ice Thorn Totem, converting that poison into 100% chill chance, allows us to have chilling totems. They don't do a lot of damage, but they chill enemies, which allows us that 150% Earthquake multiplier to kick in, and that does massive damage. We got a really nice synergy going on here. You have 4 points left and I spend those working towards some armor shred, as that theoretically lowers physical resistances and these totems shoot a lot of projectiles, but I'm not sure how effective this actually is. You could also give the totems a bit more health, for example. Our final two skills are just here to augment our damage. Frenzy Totem is a pretty big damage buff. It is on autocast and we're going the tethering route as we don't have any companions. Take 5 out of 5 Grounded, reducing mana cost and granting 25 flat fizz damage. Take Dig In, enabling the tether and giving 100% increased damage while tethered. Take 4 out of 4 Totemic Reach, increasing tether range for obvious reasons, and 5 out of 5 Dig Deep for a 250% increased crit chance while tethered. Critting with Earthquake hits feels pretty good, and we are not really focusing on crit too much, but 250% is a lot. Finally, increase the frenzy buff's effectiveness by taking 4 out of 4 Rabidity, and then you have 1 point left, which I put in Reinforced Totem. I would advise against going Berserker Frenzy. The damage increase is massive, but taking more damage is really bad in the Monolith, so this is not a route you want to take when learning boss fights or the Monolith. If you are more comfortable and more experienced with the Monolith, by all means take this and reduce the tether range to get the points. Finally, Leap Slam. It's basically just our skill to avoid big boss damage AoE attacks, but you might as well use it to augment your damage, so we're doing that too. Take 7 out of 7 Warrior's Entrance, increasing global damage by 105%. 3 out of 3 Rage gives you a lot of attack speed, mainly useful for quickly getting off an Earthquake, which otherwise roots you in place while casting. Attack speed has no impact on Tempest Strike, by the way. We went 5 out of 5 Ambush Predator, damage against enemies on full life, which is a nice way of killing off white packs. The pull node, Gravity, is nice for pulling in enemies so you can then Earthquake them. The final 4 points went into Crater and Savage Impact for a bit more damage. You could put all points in Crater too. Time to look at the passives. I am level 81 currently, and the numbers aren't displayed correctly in the base class, as I have 35 points in there. That's a small bug. Take 1 out of 8 Natural Attunement, because we have a point left. Take 5 out of 5 Tempest Born for the percentage fizz damage, and move to 5 out of 5 Thorn Bond for 4% increased damage, which is doubled with an active minion. Totems are minions. We always have an active totem, so this is 40% increased damage. Take 8 out of 8 Primal Strength, because Strength scales our attacks and provides armor. Go to 6 out of 6 Survival of the Pack for increased melee damage and Health Leech. Leech is a big part of our survivability, and Earthquake hits so hard that Health Leech is really effective. Finally, invest into the newly added Ancestral Weaponry, 10 out of 10. Insanity, of course. 40 flat fizz damage for a two-handed axe. So get that Kraken Beak and bam, there there you have 130 flat fizz damage out of nowhere. For our mastery we go Shaman for the elemental protections and the totem interactions that it provides. Take 8 out of 8 Silent Protector, giving 80 flat protections when the totem is active. Take 5 out of 5 Totemic Fury, increasing attack speed just to get that Earthquake off quickly. 8 out of 8 Tempest Form is great for us because it gives some health, chill chance, which we wanted. And of course 8 mana when using Tempest Strike, which is pretty amazing. Take 9 out of 10 Windbringer for a bit of dodge and increased fizz. Take 5 out of 5 Protective Circle, which was nerfed but is still okay, for 25 protections per active totem. And we usually have 6, so that's another 150 protections. Take 8 out of 8 Stormblade for 32% melee damage per active totem times 6. That is almost 200% increased melee damage. Finally, we are working on even more defenses with the Beastmaster node. Take 8 out of 8 Ursine Strength for strength and health. Then take 5 out of 5 Boarheart for 15% damage reduction, which is massive, and increase that to 30% with Porcupine Constitution 5 out of 5. I'm not there yet, but soon. We also take the Shark buff package with 1 out of 8 Savagery and 1 out of 8 Ambush, triggering the aspect of the shark next to the aspect of the boar. Primarily though, this is all about the boar, and that thing is just huge, and flat damage reduction is massive these days. You need something like this, and because we're getting hit a lot as melee, this is constantly active. You probably want to take this before the highest node in Shaman, honestly, also to unlock Frenzy Totem. Then, very important, gear. In my previous builds, I sort of prided myself of creating builds that worked even without good gear. It worked because those builds weren't made to push arena or high monolith. With the current system, those days are mostly over. Gear is essential now. I still tried to keep it relatively achievable with none of the set affixes included and only rares. You can find all the gear in the Tank Lab link as well. Let's talk defenses, because that is really the most important thing these days. I'm Glancing Blow capped, using Glancing Blow set. You could use the Woven Flash unique too and then get a single Glancing Blow suffix. The Leech works well, but you would miss out on a lot of protections. For crit avoidance, I am using Idols. These you find quite often, and it is a great way to get crit avoidance capped 100% without making too many sacrifices on your gear. So I suggest you use those. Apart from that, my main focus is on more defenses, vitality, flat protections, more protections. It is just extremely important. I equipped and crafted a Kraken Beak, the best two-handed axe in the game currently, and gave it some fizz scaling because we have a lot of flat fizz already. It came with Leech, not bad. You could put flat crit on there as well, and you could reach something that's close to the crit cap, honestly, with all the buffs. I went for a bit more fizz scaling on the helmet, the implicit, the amulet and the relic. My remaining idols involved crit and more fizz damage as well. Here are some base stats to aim for. 100% glancing blow, 100% crit avoidance, 8 to 900 protections without any buffs or totems, 6 or 700 health, 300% increased physical damage unbuffed. If you go to the training dummy with your stat page open, you can see that melee damage gets a big boost from having totems out. When I jump in with Leap Slam, it also is a decent buff. During combat, it is not uncommon to reach 600 to 700% increased damage just on the stat sheet. Add to that the scaling from the Earthquake tree and the massive flat fizz damage, and you see some serious damage numbers while still being very tanky. 3 initial hits hit for around 60k on the training dummy. That dummy isn't chilled, however, and none of those are crits. In the Monolith, I'm regularly critting for 20 to 25k on a single Earthquake hit, and that could happen 3 times. As you can see, the gear is pretty decent. Not absolute top tier or best in slot, but very decent. Anything less than this and higher Monoliths are going to be very problematic for you. Unfortunately, the best way to get this gear is to gamble for pieces that are your worst pieces now. Keep upgrading that way. Dropped loot is usually of horrible quality, and hovering over each piece is depressing. Gambling is depressing too, but it's a lot more efficient at least. And once you are geared up, you can just run the Monolith without looking at loot. 99% of it sucks anyway, so you're not missing out and you're making some money for your next gambling session. Leveling is easy, and I would advise you to just level using these skills. You can practice the interactions already. Most skills are available early on, and leveling should be extremely smooth. Also, during leveling, just focus on defenses. I'm incorporating a new section here, the Monolith, and I'm mainly talking about modifiers and the route you should take. Generally, I don't mind giving enemies health, crit avoidance, crit chance, because we're immune to crit anyway, chance to slow, chance to chill, or any of the heal healing modifiers. Those are all safe modifiers to take because we do decent damage. You could give them dodge, and while Earthquake cannot be dodged, everything else will be, and it just feels bad. You could give them stuff like deadly, but then be sure you don't rush the Monolith. If you have a couple of ranged deadly enemies raining health down on you while clearing a shrine, you will die. All of the modifiers to rare enemies are relatively safe, but just be aware that you don't turn those rares into mini bosses because there are a lot of them. I would really try to avoid giving enemies damage. Before, this was kind of fine and I basically said the opposite, but these modifiers translate to bosses as well. And a new boss fight, or one you're unfamiliar with, where the boss deals 100% increased damage or more, is just a death sentence. You would rather have them have a bunch of health instead. It's much better to learn the fights. I would also advise you to skip the level 80 timeline and go 90 instead. It is much easier overall. You don't have to fight that broken Lagon fight, and you lack mobility, so avoiding that beam is going to be difficult anyway, and no matter how many resistances you have, that beam will kill you, setting you back, so I would honestly avoid it like the void. Finally, the playstyle. Here's the build in action. While mapping, you make use of a 3 combo piece. First, you dive in using Leap Slam, buffing damage, then you hit with Tempest Strike until you summon your totems. Your totems now chill everyone, and then you Earthquake, usually killing the whole pack. Rinse and repeat. On bosses, you should use Leap to avoid boss AoE, not jump in. It is a very active playstyle, and you're supposed to do a lot yourself. I would put Frenzy Totem on autocast, so it is always active and you get all the buffs. Everything else, it is all you. So go out and conquer that Monolith, because this is a build that can do it. I hope you have fun with the build, guys, that it was helpful. Thanks for watching and making it to the end. See you all soon. Bye bye.